Welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, the issue of bakers declining to bake cakes for same-sex weddings is back in the news again this week. We've got two different incidents on two different continents. We had the issue of the Irish couple who refused to bake a cake for a gay activist which had a pro-gay marriage slogan on top of it. They have lost a court case, I think it was an appeal actually, which has upheld the original verdict saying that they were in the wrong for simply declining politely to do that. We've also had the couple, I think it was in Oregon in America, who attracted a lot of media attention last year, and they have finally, this week it was announced that they have finally gone out of business. They've finally closed up shop for good after the prosecution that they experienced last year for politely declining to bake a cake for a same-sex marriage. Now, I'm surprised by the number of people who don't seem to understand just how important these cases are and why there is something terribly problematic, in fact something extremely dangerous going on when you try and force people to participate in events that they find are contrary to their own personal religious beliefs, their own personal ethical views on important issues. There's a lot of confusion, it seems, with people around this issue. A lot of people are mistaking the issue of declining service to someone based on, say, gender or race or sexual orientation with what is going on in these cases, because this is not the same sort of thing at all. When you decline service to someone in an unjust way, that would be a case of someone, say, turning up to your shop and saying, "Hey, I'd like to eat your food," or "I'd like to buy a product off you," and you turning around and saying, "I'm sorry, I don't serve your kind in here," and refusing them service. You are doing something there that is unjust and is clearly discriminatory. However, if someone turns up at your place of business and says, "Look, I know you're a service provider, I'm going to be holding my own event, which is a same-sex marriage, and I want you to participate in that event by taking photographs or baking a cake," then what they are doing now is something quite different. They are asking you to participate in their event and to effectively give your assent to the act that they are going to be carrying out. That's quite different. If I serve you in a restaurant, or I'm a taxi driver or a photographer and I just take photographs for you, just generic run-of-the-mill photos, or I provide you some sort of food or service, to do that I'm not required to give any sort of ethical assent to your personal beliefs. I'm not required to give any sort of religious assent. I'm not required to assent to your personal beliefs and views in any way whatsoever. But the moment I'm required to participate in an event that you are running, an event that actually has a particular ethical connotation, or an event that makes a particular ethical statement, then I am being required to give my assent to what you are doing, and that's quite different. And at that point, I should be free to say politely, "Thanks, but no thanks." Freedom of conscience is an important thing, and I'm choosing to exercise my legitimate right to freedom of conscience here. These laws are actually really, really important. And like I said, it's astounding to me how many people are so confused about this issue. I think part of the issue is people confuse what freedom of conscience is actually all about. Freedom of conscience is not simply the freedom to simply believe a set of ideas and principles in your head, or to believe a set of ideas and principles that you might talk with people about. Freedom of conscience goes beyond that. Freedom of conscience is actually about the right to apply those principles that you believe and hold firmly to be true. Freedom of conscience is about your right to apply those principles in the real world, to allow those principles to govern your actions and your speech, the things you do and don't do. And in this case, declining politely to bake a cake, you are simply declining to participate in a same-sex marriage. You are simply allowing your deeply held ethical convictions to guide your actions. And at the end of the day, by refusing to bake that cake or take those photographs or be the DJ or whatever it is that someone expects you to do, you are not causing any real, permanent, or even long-term harm. The most harm that will be caused is very minor and transitory. Someone is going to have hurt feelings at the very worst, and then they might have to go somewhere else and they'll find someone else to provide that service for them who's quite happy to do those things. That's how freedom of conscience is supposed to work. No one is being harmed. Your right to conscientiously object is being upheld, and that's exactly how things are supposed to work. But what we've got in these cases now is people who are being forced to override their own conscience. People are being told you must participate in my event regardless of what you actually believe. Whatever it is you hold to be true personally, I don't give a damn about that. You have to participate in my event. And what we've got now is the courts coming down on the side of people who believe this kind of crazy idea. And you've got the courts effectively saying, yes, it is the role of the state, it is the role of the law to make sure that people are protected from having hurt feelings. But that's obviously not how the law should be used, and it is extremely problematic. I mean, exactly how far does this newfound approach to protecting people's hurt feelings actually go? Are we going to have a situation where someone turns up in a bakery and says, I would like you to bake me a cake that says, I love Sharia law? And the baker says, well, look, actually, no, I don't want to, because I don't want to give a cent to that. I don't think Sharia law is a good thing at all. I don't want to participate in any sort of celebration of Sharia law because it obviously clearly mistreats women. It's got some violent and problematic aspects to it. I don't want to enshrine in any way or give any sort of support, even tacit support, to that idea. What happens if someone turns up and says to a baker, I want you to bake me a cake that says rape is funny? Should a person be forced to bake that cake even though they might think that that's a reprehensible statement to make? Or what about someone who turns up to a bakery that's run by a gay person and says, I would like you to make me a cake. We're going to have a big celebration this weekend to celebrate traditional one man, one woman marriage. So I want you to bake me a cake for that event, and I want you to ice the top of that cake with the words, marriage equals one man, one woman. Should that gay baker be forced to bake that cake? I don't think they actually should. And like I said, no harm is being done by refusing these types of requests. At worst, someone is going to experience some hurt feelings for a very brief period of time. You see, the law, the state, should not be in the business of turning free people into blind, obedient, subservient slaves who are forced to provide or do things for other people without any regard for their conscience. You should not be forced to merely be a dispenser of services and to override your own conscientious views and opinions on issues. This is one of those cornerstone fundamental laws that makes the West the West. It is unique to us and it's profoundly important. And when you undermine this, you are really selling our birthright down the river, and you are creating all sorts of very dangerous precedents and problems. Effectively, the state and the law is now becoming an arbiter of personal conscience, what you can and cannot believe, and how you can actually allow your own life to be governed when you are not causing any harm at all to another person by simply acting in a particular way. Now, that is really, really troubling. And this, as I said, is really problematic because there's no other situation in which the law makes you participate in an event just to placate someone else's hurt feelings. Imagine if someone turned up to a wedding photographer and they said, look, I want you to photograph my wedding. It's on this particular date. And the wedding photographer said, look, I'd love to help, but I've got a wedding on that day that finishes at 12 p.m. and then I've got another one at 4 p.m. And the person says, oh, that's fine. My wedding's at 2 p.m. and I only need you for an hour. But the wedding photographer says, look, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I've already got 2 weddings that day. I have a personal policy that I don't book any more than 2 weddings. And I want to spend a bit of time with my family in between those 2 weddings. So I'm politely declining to participate in your event. That person couldn't take a court case and say, well, look, this is offensive to me, my feelings are hurt, I want this photographer, they're a really good photographer, they've got no right to refuse me service, they've got nothing else booked. They should be forced to come to my event and provide their service at my event. Otherwise, my feelings will be hurt. I will be put out. I won't get the photographer I want. I'll have to go somewhere else and get someone else to photograph my event. The courts would laugh that kind of case right out of the place. They would never even bother. It wouldn't even get very far at all, and rightly so. But effectively what we've got here now with these gay marriage cases is people who are being forced into that very situation. People who run businesses, who are service providers, are now being told how and when they must provide their service. And more importantly, they are being told that they have to override their own personal conscience, and that is extremely troubling. The simple fact is that no one else should be forcing you to act against your conscience if your refusal to do a certain thing is not going to cause any harm. You should not be forced to participate in any event that you don't want to participate in if your refusal to participate is not going to cause harm. It's that simple. And anyone who is endorsing these kind of legal actions, you are effectively setting up a tyrannical state, a tyrannical legal system, and sooner or later, that tyrannical legal system is going to start knocking on your door and asking you to do things that you don't necessarily agree with either. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.